Thank God it's Friday. Welcome to Business Morning on Channels TV. I'm Ini John Mekwa. Well, we start with updates from the global oil space. Oil prices edged up today, but we're headed for their first weekly losses in at least 8 weeks after U.S. oil stocks rose more than expected and Iran flagged that it was resuming talks with Western powers, which could lead to an end to sanctions. Brent crude futures rose 27 cents to $84.59 a barrel, while U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude futures were up 12 cents to $82.93 a barrel. The heat has come out of a 2-month rally stoked by tight gas and coal prices in Europe and China, which had spurred fuel switching in power generation to fuel oil and diesel, while oil supplies were tight. And back here in Nigeria, the Federation Account Allocation Committee has shared the sum of 739.96 billion naira to the 3 tiers of government as revenue for October. A statement issued at the end of FAC virtual meeting mentions that the total amount comprises of distributable statutory revenue of 577.76 billion naira, 159.09 billion naira distributable value-added tax revenue, an exchange gain of 3.10 billion naira. A breakdown of the total revenue distributed shows that the federal government received 301.31 billion naira, state government received 220.272 billion naira. 164.176 billion naira was allocated to local government councils, while 54.206 billion naira was shared to relevant states as 13 derivatives revenue. Collaboration between tertiary institutions and capital market operators is vital in preparing Nigerian youth for emerging advantages within the capital market. The president of the Chartered Institute of Stockbrokers gave this submission at the association's 25th annual conference, which was held in Lagos. It had the theme Capital Market as a catalyst for economic development and sustainable growth. It also highlighted some steps needed to achieve this goal.
My thoughts would be, why did it...
You cannot see growth without financing. You cannot achieve sustainable financing without experienced and knowledgeable financial intermediators. And that is what this institute do, is to train competent, and capable financial intermediators. And that is what we do. And we've done quite a bit on the side of institute to try and engage the youths. I mean, we have our regular essay competition we hold in schools. We are continually, encouraging the government, all right, to actually introduce securities and investment as a graduate, postgraduate course in various universities. We already have collaboration with the NUC and various universities to try and establish that particular graduate study. We are also engaging with the NUC to actually have security and investment be one of the fundamental courses that all undergraduates in universities take.
Well, response to Nigeria's balance of payment challenge has led to the creation of a parallel foreign exchange market to avoid the short-term effect of a depreciation of the naira on domestic prices while retaining some degree of control over capital outflows and international reserves. However, the situation has had many turns, and the country has witnessed a lot of effort by the CBN to change the tide. We're going to review some of that this morning with Oladipo Ajayi, analyst with Chapel Hill Denham. Hello, good morning, Oladipo Ajayi. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you very much.
So let's take your view with what's going on in the FX space now. The CBN, on the back of discontinuing FX sales to the BDC, increased allocation to bank for invisible transaction. Can we say that this has had the expected and desired effect?
Yeah, thank you very much. If you look at where we were as at the time the CBN actually took that decision, and where we are currently now, I think is a very good decision because what we've seen in the market is that we've seen more supply on the back of the CBN. And at the same time, we've seen more of effective distribution of FX on the part of bank as well. If you look at it before now, it's always very difficult for people to actually get access to PTA, BTA, and other visibles. But with the full push of responsibility on the back, we'll see more effective distribution of that. And one way or the other, we've seen the impact in the market. And at the same time, what that has done to the market is that the CBN has been able to actually now supply appropriately. Because when the CBN governor mentioned that at the May MPC, where that decision was taken, he actually highlighted that they are currently selling close to about $150 million to BDC on a weekly basis. So the view is that if such volume is actually pushed into the hand of banks for effective distribution, that will actually see the impact in the market. And as we speak, now we are currently seeing a better impact compared to where we were.
Okay, so with the report from CBN that the net foreign exchange flow, the way it is now, does it mean that we are in a new dawn?
Yeah, exactly. That is exactly what I highlighted earlier because it means that we are in new regime. It was a very difficult decision on the part of CBN at that particular point in time. But I think in retrospect, for them, they feel that they've taken the right decision. Although it took them a long time before they actually went that route. But if you look at it critically, there's no better decision than what they've done because it means that we can now take effects from that point, from here now to where we want to actually go to. And one thing about the pressure we're currently seeing on FX is because of demand and supply. So with effective distribution of FX, of available FX, I think we'll be able to actually reduce the pressure. While CBN are actually putting other measures in place to actually further stabilize Naira appropriately.
And also, looking at the foreign reserve, it's in the north, about $40 billion. Do you think the days of consistent pressure on the Naira is over?
For me, I think we are getting close to that day. I think we are getting closer to it because we currently have a very healthy reserve currently. We are moving closer to 41 billion, and oil price is still on the upside move. And all we need to just do is to further ramp up supply to the market so that we'll be able to maximize the current high oil price. And looking at that, I think we are getting closer to the day because with that level of reserve, the CBN should be able to now come up with policies that will further strengthen Naira. And what they need to do currently is that to reassure the market and reassure foreign investors at this point. Because foreign investors, most time before coming to your market, they look at many indices, they look at sanity in your market, they look at your reserve, that's your capability to actually repay in the event that they want to leave your country. And they also look at the return on your investments. So as we speak currently, I think the CBN needs to look at all these factors. And but whenever those factors are actually met, I think we'll likely see influx of foreign investors into our market. Some of the boxes has been ticked, reserve aspect has been ticked. So we just need to work around other aspects for us to actually lure investors into our market.
Okay, but I mean, obviously, our reserve is connected to whatever is happening to oil prices. And we see that the current surge in COVID cases has also reduced demand. And then we see the price dropping, even though this morning we see that it's a bit up compared to yesterday. But I mean, even the report says that it's heading for a 2-week low. So don't you think that perhaps we shouldn't get so comfortable and feel that our reserve is actually heading on a bullish run now?
Yeah, even with a 2-week low, we are still far better than what the budget benchmark. I think budget benchmark was $58. So it means that anything above $58 is a very good one for us. And as we speak, we are far above that market price as we speak now. We are not $80. So it means that even if we actually market need to retrace, market will retrace to around 70 terrain, which is still not a very bad one for us. So I think all we just need currently is, because as we speak, we are not producing to our quota. So what we just need to do is to ramp up supply to the market and find a way to actually use that to augment whatever retracement in price, so as to continue to keep the reserve stable at this level.
And then the information about the rate spike during the week, in the FX market. What's your take on that?
Yeah, we had the information about the CBN intervention rate to FAIs. If you look at the past, it's past average around 411 for 411 for exports and around 419 for a forward transaction. But that took a new turn on Monday, and when CBN sold at 443 and 451 respectively for both markets. And there was an initial panic in the market that to actually confirm if this is going to be permanent, or maybe the CBN has taken that another step to actually devalue the currency. But subsequent action in the market shows that it sounds like a one-off to us. And so, however, we are waiting for the next intervention fund for foreign investors. That will for that give us a clearer picture of what direction the CBN is actually to tow around that line.
This creates an uncertain atmosphere for foreign investors. We do not know for sure. We have to wait and see, okay, next time, are they going to sell it for 411 or 40? Isn't this a discouraging factor for foreign investors?
I think that's one of the things that I said, I mentioned earlier on, that we need to actually tick. That's one of the boxes that we mentioned earlier that we need to tick. I said that sanity of the market, and when you cannot predict the market, it means that there's a lot of insanity in that particular market. And I think that's currently what is actually happening in our market now. And this to me, if at the end of the day, what we'll see is that they are consistently selling at that rate to FEIs, and whereas the IE window is still trading around 411, 415 level. It means to us that we have created that additional window, which is totally against the expectation of the market. Even currently with the multiple windows we have currently, the IMF has continually criticized the CBN around that line, that we need to actually match the windows together and create a single FX market where we can actually get liquidity and at the same time be able to predict the direction of the markets appropriately. So I think the CBN needs to actually clear the air on this and be able to reassure the markets of the direction of FX.
Okay, but is it, realistically possible to merge the windows? Like, that the IMF has talked about the different rates in the different windows. But from your perspective, as someone who has a hands-on information, is it possible to have a single rate in the FX space of Nigeria?
I think it is very, very possible because, since speaking before now, I'm sure we've been at this point before, around 2016. We've been here before, where we have multiple windows. And because one thing about multiple windows, like create room for arbitrage, and they create room for rent seeking. And that's one of the things that the CBN actually fighting against. You can't fight against something, but yet you are creating the opportunity for people to actually take advantage of that. And I think we can actually do that because what gave back to the IIN window is same thing that is exactly what's currently happening now. The CBN is actually looking at to actually align all markets into a particular market where we can actually get price discovery. So I think it is very possible, although at the initial stage there will be volatility in the market. But what that would go on at the end of the day, market will stabilize and find its level. And when market finds its level, it's easier for CBN to provide liquidity at the fair value of the currency. And at the same time, it will help CBN on the part of their own fund management, because what that will do to the markets is that we'll see a lot of foreign investments into the country as a result of clarity of the FX market, and also liquidity of the markets. It doesn't make sense for us to have several markets, but yet they are not liquid. I think it's even better for us to have just a single market where you actually can find liquidity and market can actually trade appropriately.
Doesn't that point to the fact that perhaps the problem that should be focused on now is liquidity, supply of these effects, and then other things might just fall into place?
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, supply is very, very key. And there's no how. And also, at the same time, you cannot actually expect the CBN to totally float the currency at this particular point in time. It's actually very dangerous. But however, the CBN needs to continue to supply the market. And one of the problems we currently have is that if CBN is the sole supplier of the market, then that's where the problem lies. We do criticize the fact that foreign investors FAIs that are actually hot money. I agree to a great extent that FAIs are hot money, but at the same time, they help you in their inflows and outflow help you in the money management. It's just like you saying a current account holder in a bank is hot money. Of course, it helps the bank to actually manage its liquidity. When the inflow comes, you know how to manage. When there's outflow, you know how to manage it. So in the same vein, we need to work on that seriously. And I think by so doing, when there's clarity in your markets, the CBN will now have to sit back and just do more like an oversight of the market. So what you do is that when you know that the market is misbehaving and you notice that the naira is getting full beating, you can come in at that particular point and supply the market. And when you find out that, oh, naira is threatening beyond a particular level, you can go into the market and buy. That is what we mean by managing liquidity in the market. So I think the CBN need to actually work around that, because if they are the sole supplier of FX to the market, we'll continue to be on this page.
So what's from your perspective would be, apart from, the CBN stepping back, like you said, not being the sole supplier, when we talk about creating more liquidity in that space, we've talked a lot about diversity, attracting foreign, diversification, beg your pardon, and attracting more foreign investors. I suppose these are other ways, that can also boost liquidity or Forex.
Yeah, I agree so much with you about the diversification of our economy. And if you look at that, that is not solely in the purview of the CBN. It's more of the monetary and the policy and the fiscal policy guys. They need to work together. And sincerely speaking, a lot of things has to be fixed, because it's not only about effects. It's more structural, because in a situation where we find exporters are finding it very difficult to actually export their product. Their container stays days at the port before being exported, and all those things like that. And the bottleneck they face to actually get their goods outside the country. Those are the things that the government needs to actually work on seriously. Even if you need to actually create incentive for exporters to actually give them that opportunity for them to actually want to export their product. I think we need to toe that line seriously as we speak. And at the same time, aside oil, the government's already looking at agriculture, but how much are we actually doing in that space? Is it more for subsistence, just for consumption, or we are pushing for a larger scale, more of like industrialization of that sector, in a situation whereby, for example, we are currently producing cocoa. So is it to actually produce the raw material and export, or to produce the raw material and also to actually produce the finished product from the raw material, so that we can generate better efforts in that line? Because of what you use is that you produce cocoa, you export cocoa, you import chocolate. To me, to a great extent, it doesn't mean anything, because the inflow from the cocoa is what you actually are flowing at the same time for the importation of the finished product. So we need to work around that seriously. And also in the same vein, the PMX and diesel and all those lines as well. In one of the CBN meetings, the central bank governor actually opined that currently we like 30% of the inflow from OISE is actually the same thing that we use for importation of refined products.
Yeah.
So if you actually want to actually get out of this current situation, we have to turn most of this thing around so that for us to have LD, FX reserve, and the capacity to actually supply to the market appropriately.
All right, thank you so much, Oladipo Ajayi. Well, the journey towards a healthy FX supply, I guess. We do hope that we do end that journey one day. Thank you so much and enjoy your weekend.
You're most welcome. Thank you.
So, how does the Tax Appeal Tribunal rules of 2021 affect you? You want to know? Find out after the break. You're watching Business Morning on Channels Television. You're welcome back. Well, the Honorable Minister of Finance, Zainab Ahmed, recently issued a new Tax Appeal Tribunal rules for 2021. The rules were issued under paragraph 21 of the 5th schedule to the Federal Inland Revenue Service Act 2007. The rules replaced the 2010 rules and are intended to guide the practice and procedure of tax appeal tribunal proceedings. Sounds very technical. Well, thank God we do have with us here the immediate past Director General of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry and now the Chief Executive Officer of Center for Promotion of Private Enterprises, Dr. Muda Yusuf, to break it down for us. Who better than you to do it? Good morning, Dr. Yusuf.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. So first of all, help us to understand this rule, who it concerns, and how it affects you and I.
Yeah, the rule is about the procedure of the Tax Appeal Tribunal. And of course, there are some parts of the rule or components of the rule that one should commend. First, there is a provision about electronic filing.
Yeah.
So at least in these days of technology, I mean, that's a welcome development. You don't have to go and file physically. There's also the provision about virtual appearance. In other words, if you want to appear before the tribunal, the new rule says that you can appear virtually. Again, that's about applying technology to the proceedings of the tribunal. There's also the component that has to do with the place of hearing. You know, we have different zones, about 8 zones of those tribunals. And for convenience, you can file for hearing or for your complaints, whatever it is, in any zone, depending on what is convenient for you. So these provisions, I think, is something that we should comment.
So sorry, is that depending on what's convenient for you, depending on where you are operating from? Is that a factor to be considered?
Where you are operating from and where it is also convenient, because again, it's a function of your main operational base, your headquarters, and all of those things, and where the key actors also stay. So I think that, again, is something that one has to commend. The one that is a bit contentious and which is a bit disturbing is one that says that if you are making a complaint around the issue of tax assessment, you have to deposit 50% of the amount in dispute. In other words, if you have an assessment that you are contesting, no matter how much the assessment is, you have to deposit 50% of that. I think that, for me, is something that needs to be reviewed. Because the whole principle of tribunal and of this arbitration or dispute management system is to also ensure the principle of fair hearing. Because you cannot have a situation where, supposing you have a very outrageous assessment, to the extent that even the 50% may become even difficult for you to pay. Does that mean you'll not be entitled to an appeal?
That means you'll be forced to just bear.
Yeah, that is if you can afford it. It can be outrageous sometimes. You know, so the point is that that provision, I think, is something that we need to look at in the interest of fair hearing. Because we are talking about creating a tax environment that will promote investment. Because in economics, there's something we call a general equilibrium theory. And what that theory says is that if you have a policy and you want to achieve an objective, in this case, the whole essence of this tax administration is about revenue. But we need to look beyond revenue and look at how some of these things affect other parts or other aspects of our economic life and other aspects of national life. So that is very important, and that is the whole principle about a general equilibrium mindset. There is this, urge, this bullishness about raising revenue. And you can push this thing to a point that you begin to do so at the detriment of investment.
And then the whole country will lose.
The whole country will lose. Because, okay, you generate the revenue, but what is happening to investment? What is happening to job creation? What is happening to prices? What is happening to the welfare of the people? Because some of this drive for revenue, sometimes it is the common man that bears the brunt. Because some of these things have a way of affecting the end users. So the point I'm making is that the Tax Appeal Tribunal, the procedures, the new rule that was, announced by the finance minister, which was effective from the 1st of June, is something that we need to review in the interest of fair hearing. And it could also create challenges for the process. The process could also be compromised. If you have a situation where you know that no matter the amount of assessment, before anybody can listen to you, you have to first deposit 50%. It puts you under a lot of pressure, and it could compromise the integrity of the whole process. So the appeal here, and it's a very strong appeal, in the interest of promoting investment, in the interest of ensuring fairness and equity, in the interest of also creating jobs, which the president has been emphasizing, we need to create a tax environment that is investment friendly.
But are there steps or are there any efforts, to get this appeal to the minister, or at least start the process of getting, this sorted out?
It's an advocacy process. Various organizations have raised concerns about it. Some experts in the tax environment have raised concerns about this. But, advocacy is work in progress. For as long as you have these challenges, we should continue to advocate. It's not even so much about the legality, because there's also the legal angle. When you look at the procedures and you look at the Federal Inland Revenue Establishment Act of 2007, there's also some inconsistency. But that is not even the issue. The issue is to get the authorities to see reason, to appreciate the challenges that this provision creates for investors.
What would be the ideal from your perspective when we're talking about this 50%?
No, well, the ideal, because if you look at the FIRS Establishment Act, there's already a provision there of 2007 that it is the tribunal that will use its discretion on what amount of deposit you pay. And that will even arise only if you have not been filing returns. That is what is in the Act. But this one is completely different. So that is a bit fair. And even if you have to make a deposit according to that Act, you pay the actual amount that you paid the previous year. Then your appeal can be heard. But when you have a situation where you pay 50% of the amount in disputes, I don't think it's fair. So it's an issue of fairness. It's an issue of getting, the investors to have some more confidence. Because if you have a tax environment that could be frightening or that could scare investors, then you have a problem. Just as I said, tax administration or tax is not just only about revenue. We need to look at the wider implications. Because I've been seeing even in the National Assembly, practically all the agencies of government are now being pushed to go and raise revenue. Even those that are not revenue-generating agencies. And I know what investors are facing already, especially with agencies that they interface with. The regulatory agencies, for instance. There are all sorts of fees, levies, renewal fees.
Do we still have, do we still have the issue of multiple taxation? Because the government has come up you know, a couple of times to say the system has been aligned.
No,
you know.
no. Those problems are still there. You may not call them tax. If you have a regulation, there are some sectors where you could have up to 5, 6, or 7 regulators. And for each of them, for all your interaction with them, you have to make some payments. And there is no framework to regulate some of these fees. And when you engage them, they will tell you, well, they are not being properly funded. They have to generate IGR. So you have a situation where the investors, apart from paying the mainstream tax, which is the corporate tax, the VAT, and the rest of them, you also, in a way, also have the responsibility of financing the agencies of government. Because they will tell you that they have to generate revenue for them to be able to run their operations. And now that the government is even getting more bullish in terms of revenue drive, the situation may even get worse. So the point I'm making is that if we create an environment, a tax environment, that is more investment friendly, that is not too harsh, that is not draconian, invariably, we will see a positive impact on investment.
And I guess it's
we will
also
see a positive impact on GDP.
Yeah.
And if the economy is growing, tax revenue will grow.
I guess it's also important to also note here that payment of tax is a necessity and it's a responsibility that I don't think the private sector want to run away from.
Certainly not. Certainly not. Certainly not. I'm not here to canvass that people should not pay tax. It's a statutory responsibility. And for anybody to be a responsible corporate citizen, you have to pay your tax. But the point I'm making is that we have to make it easy. There has to be fairness. I mean, there are some what we call the principles of taxation. There's the principle of fairness of tax. There's the principle of convenience. There's the principle of efficiency. There's also the benefits principle of taxation. So there are so many things. These are principles that guides very good tax administration. So as much as possible, we should align our tax management, tax administration system to these key principles.
And they should
in the interest of the economy.
They should even also promote the ease of doing business policy.
Yes. It's an investment climate issue. Because we have been clamoring for investment. Domestic investors, we want foreign investors, all of them. We want to create an environment for them to come. If you see countries that are attracting a lot of investment, they are doing a lot in the area of the taxes. I'm not saying that people are not paying taxes there. But the tax is such a way that it encourages people to come and invest. And just as I said, we should not only be focusing on revenue. If you focus on revenue, you may have a situation where you do so at the detriment of investment, at the detriment of the capacity to create jobs. So the way to measure the efficiency of some of these things is not to be looking narrowly as to how much has been generated. We should be looking at how has this also affected investment? How has it affected job creation? What are the investors saying about this? What kind of feedback do you have? I mean, take, for instance, the customs. The customs has a dual responsibility or dual role of revenue generation, of trade facilitation. I can tell you almost 100% focus of the customs is on revenue generation. And if you see what some investors go through, just going through the ports, not only the customs, all the agencies, it is a nightmare. And how will an investor at the end of the day be able to even generate the revenue for you? If from day one, even before making money, there's a lot of pressure already.
But are there conversations?
We are talking of raw materials, we are talking of equipment, we are talking of so many things.
Are there conversations between the private and the public sector, maybe the Ministry of Trade, to try to balance out things like this?
There are conversations. I mean, this has been ongoing. It's one thing to have an engagement. It's another thing to have an outcome in terms of results or impact. But those engagements have to be sustained by all the key players in the private sector. So those things are necessary so that we have a conducive investment environment. Because that is what we desire generally. That is what the president desires. Because we need an environment that can generate a lot more employment. The president has been talking about taking 100 million people out of poverty in 10 years. How will you do that? It is not by the handout of the social investment program. It is about what investors are able to do, especially the SMEs, because they are more in number. They have the spread, you know? So if we do that, and I'm saying that this tax issue is also a very important, and this is not just only about federal. I must emphasize that.
Yeah, because we have local government,
we have
guys
local
who come to claim they are
yes, all sorts of characters will just knock at your door and be asking for all manner of things. And if you don't comply very quickly, they have all sorts of people, before you know, they will seal up your premises and embarrass you. The same thing at the state level. So this principle must apply to all levels of government. The principle of fairness and the consciousness that we need to grow this economy, we need to support investments. We should not sacrifice investment on the altar of revenue generation.
All right, thank you.
That is important.
Thank you so much, Dr. Muda Yusuf, for helping us unbundle the seemingly technical appeal tribunal procedure and, of course, how it affects everyone. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having this conversation with you. Of course, Dr. Muda Yusuf is the immediate past Director General of LCCI and now the Chief Executive Officer of Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprise. So we'll now do an opening call to the market where Will Ibong is standing by to give us a summary of how the market went yesterday. Hello, Will.
Oh, yes, yesterday was a fantastic one in the equities market because it snapped back the losses that we recorded on Wednesday. The all-share index not a remarkable 0.41% gain to close at 41,000 naira, 61.14 points, and it's nearing the 42,000 level. And like one of our analysts said, Abdurrashid Momo said yesterday, he said 41,000, we're nearing the 42,000 level. We want to hit that, and that's where we're going to use as our benchmark. And we're also nearing the 22,000 trillion naira mark there. So investors' interest in MTN, Nigerian breweries, lifted the market yesterday, and you're seeing month-to-date gain and the year-to-date gain increasing to 4.3% and 4.2% respectively. Now, the consumer goods sector put on a good show yesterday. We saw Cadbury up 10%. Guinness was also up 10%. And meanwhile, Guinness published its first quarter 2022 unaudited results, reporting an earnings per share of 1 naira 85 kobo in the first quarter of 2021 versus the loss per share of 38 kobo recorded in the first quarter of 2021. And maybe that influenced the investor sentiment in the market for those shares because, as I mentioned earlier, it was up 10% yesterday. Now, the total volume traded yesterday increased by 96.4% to 558.89 million units and was valued at 4.4 billion naira. Now, the only decline we saw was in the number of deals, which is about 4,683. FBN still remained the most traded stock by volume and value at 162.61 million and 1.87 billion naira, respectively. Now we're going to switch quickly over to the fixed income market, where we still saw some bullish sentiments operating there, and there was also a bond auction, an Omo auction yesterday, and we have Caleb Alimi to tell us what happened. Good morning, Caleb.
Good morning.
Caleb, so tell us yesterday, give us a summary of the Omo auction, tell us what happened and what really went down.
Okay, interestingly, I'll speak about the Omo auction and the NCB auction that happened on Wednesday. Omo auction was yesterday. At yesterday's Omo auction, the CBN offered about 20 billion across 3 maturities, 96-day, 187-day, and 348-day maturities. However, they sold a total of 19 billion. And then maintained all their rates across the 3 maturities. They sold the 96-day at 7%, 187-day at 8.5%, and the 348 days at 10.1%. It's interesting to note that what has only changed for the Omo auctions are the volumes that they bring on offer. The interest rates have remained frozen for the last many months. On the NTB space, there was also an auction, like I said, on Wednesday, where the GMO sold a total of 235 billion worth of paper. 85 billion more than what was actually offered across 3 tenors as well, the 91-day, the 182 days, and the 364 days. We observed that of all the 3 maturities, only the 1-year paper further declined by about 26 basis points. The 91-day and the 102-day paper remained stable at 2.5 and 3.5%. The decline in the NTD auction rate was largely due to pent-up demand for in the secondary markets, which have to flow to that market to pick up as much as they can. That will be all on that side of Treasuries and bonds. That explains the bullish sentiment in that market, largely because of pent-up demand due to reduced supply of Omo papers and a lot of demand for the one-year paper.
Thank you so much for that clarification. That really put a lot of light to probably investors' questions, what's happening in the fixed income space. So, Ini, that's Caleb Alimi, is a fixed income dealer at FSDH Merchant Bank. Thank you so much again. And, Ini, that's what we have for the market for today.
Yeah, well, I guess it's important to note at this time that tomorrow there will be capital markets, and then you can have a whole lot of information about what's happening in the capital market in Nigeria and even outside Nigeria, and we'll have a 30-minute conversation. So do join us 7 p.m. tomorrow for capital market. Well, Will, thank you so much. For now, we'll take a break. When we come back, we'll do an opening call to London. Do stay with us. You're welcome back. We'll head straight to London now for Juliana to fill us in. And I know one of the biggest news coming from there now is the issue of the fishing rights with France, and started yesterday. Anyway, good morning, Juliana. Thank you so much for joining us, as usual.
Good morning, Annie.
So the UK has summoned a French ambassador on the post-Brexit fishing rights row. What's the update on this?
Yeah, gosh, you're right. It's a huge story. And this post-Brexit fishing rights row between France and Britain took an extraordinary turn overnight. The Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss, has summoned Catherine Colonna, who is the French ambassador to Britain. Very, very rare for such close allies to take such an embarrassing turn. But, of course, Britain are really disappointed, they say, with France, because earlier this week a British vessel was detained for what France say was illegally fishing in their waters. Another British vessel was fined for not allowing police to carry out a full inspection. Last night, the Brexit Minister, Lord Frost, held an emergency meeting looking at ways that London could respond to what they call really fierce confrontations by France. There are some concerns, Inni, that this could turn into a full-blown trade war between France and Britain. So in the next couple of days, we've got lots of things happening. We've got G20 gathering. Of course, we've got COP26, which is taking place in Britain. So certainly Prime Minister Boris Johnson and the French President Emmanuel Macron will have a face-to-face discussion. But, you know, over the past couple of years, especially because of Brexit, France and Britain's relationship has been tense at the very least, and this is not helping. Just to remind our viewers, what's caused this is, of course, Brexit. France really not happy that many of their fishermen are not being allowed access to fish in British waters that they say is allowed in the post-Brexit agreement. Very, very briefly, because I know we don't have time, if an agreement isn't patched out by Tuesday, the French have said that they will ban British fishing vessels in French ports, reinforce customs and hygiene controls. There will be routine security checks on British vessels and reinforcement on controls on lorries. And that is a threat that Britain is not taking lightly. As you said, it's an evolving story, and we'll be updating you as soon as we get more information.
Sure, Juliana. And, you know, adding this to the supply chain disruption, I mean, doesn't look good at all. We do hope that when they meet, that they can actually compromise and find a safe ground. But in other stories, there seem to be further changes expected on the COVID travel red list.
Yes, much to, I would say, the relief of the final 7 countries that are on the red list. Just to remind everyone, Colombia, the Dominican Republic, Haiti, Panama, Peru, and Venezuela is going to be scrapped. So from Monday at 4 a.m., the Transport Secretary, Grant Shapps, he took to Twitter and said that there will be no longer need to quarantine. Now, at its height, the very controversial quarantine exemption list had about 54 countries on it. You had to pay over £2,200, and I was so surprised to see that over 200,000 people were forced into that quarantine, having to pay that amount since it came in February. Of course, now we're getting used to the vaccination program across the world. Scientists and the health practitioners here in the UK are pretty certain that these countries, these last 7 countries, no longer pose a risk for varying variants. So the list is going to be scrapped. There are still going to be lots of mandatory controls, but yes, no longer having to pay a hefty bill, particularly for those regions, I believe, who are predominantly in Latin and South America.
Well, I guess that's learning to live with COVID. That's what we're actually doing in the world now. Thank you so much, Juliana. We'll talk to you again at 1:30 during Business Incorporated.
Thank you.
So let's move to the crypto space now, and we see that $19 million was added to the market cap, bringing it to $5.59 trillion, and that's a 3.69 increase over the last day. The total crypto market volume over the last 24 hours is $160.66 billion, which makes a 15.45% decrease. The total volume in DeFi currently is $16.84 billion. That's 10.48% of the total crypto market 24-hour volume. The volume of all stable coins is now $127.87 billion. That shows a 79.59% of the total crypto market 24-hour volume. Now, let's look at what's happening with Bitcoin. The price at about 9 a.m. was heading to 61,000. Well, thank God, almost 3% increase in the day. Its volume, $43.75 billion. And its dominance shows a decrease, though, over the day, 0.41% decrease to just about 44%. Now, let's see what's going on the gainers table. The gainers table, we have both Binance Coin and Cardano change places today from the losers table to the gainers. Binance Coin did more, with about 6%, while Cardano added just about 4 cents. After adding about $10 in 24 hours, Solana also joins the gainers table, over 6% increase. We also see XRP gained the most, about 2%, going for $1.06. Polkadot has been favored by investors. It went up more than 3%. And then we go to the flip side, the losers table now. USDT negatively flat. Dogecoin deepens its losses from yesterday, lost over 10%. And we have Atom also there, losing, well, just about 0.5%. All right, so watch out to see what's going to happen in the market over this weekend. I know a lot of investors will be keeping their fingers crossed to see how the market goes. Will it be a red or a green weekend? Well, just watch the space, but always remember, here on Business Morning, we do not give you advice. We just report the market to you. Well, that's it on the program. Thank you so much for being a part of it. But join us at 1:30. We'll have updates from the world of business for you. I'm Ini John Mekwa.